courtroom at Providence Municipal Court fell silent when James Patterson wheeled himself through the doors. 67 years old, wearing his Vietnam veteran's cap and a simple button-down shirt, he navigated his wheelchair with practiced ease despite the cast on his left arm and the visible bruising that still marked his face 3 months after the accident. His daughter, Rebecca, walked beside him, one hand resting protectively on his shoulder. Across the aisle sat Victoria Ashford, 45, wife of tech billionaire Richard Ashford, whose $8.4 billion fortune came from cloud storage patents. Victoria wore a cream-colored Chanel suit that cost $12,000, Louboutin heels at $1,495, and carried a Hermes Birkin bag worth $45,000. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, her manicured nails, a fresh set that morning at 3:80, drummed impatiently on the defense table. She was eating a salad, in court, from a container that her assistant had brought from some overpriced restaurant downtown. She chewed slowly, occasionally checking her phone, as if the proceedings were merely an inconvenient interruption to her day. Behind her sat 4 attorneys from Whitmore and Associates, led by senior partner Douglas Whitmore himself, who commanded $2,200 per hour. The message was unmistakable. Unlimited money meant unlimited defense. But they were about to meet Judge Frank Caprio. Before we dive into what happened in that courtroom, if you believe in justice and want to support a new channel dedicated to sharing these powerful stories, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. Every subscription helps us bring more of Judge Caprio's wisdom to light. Judge Caprio entered, and everyone rose, except Victoria, who took another bite of her salad before slowly standing with an exaggerated sigh. At 79, with 37 years on the bench, Caprio had seen every type of defendant, but something about the woman before him, the boredom in her eyes, the contempt in her posture, made his jaw tighten. Case number 2024 CR 6842, the clerk announced. The People versus Victoria Ashford. Charges include reckless driving resulting in serious bodily injury, leaving the scene of an accident, and obstruction of justice. Douglas Whitmore stood immediately. Your Honor, before we proceed, I must state for the record that my client strongly disputes these characterizations. What occurred on the morning of June 18th was an unfortunate traffic incident complicated by the victim's decision to operate a wheelchair in a vehicular travel lane during peak traffic hours. Mrs. Ashford maintained proper speed and had the right of way. We're prepared to demonstrate that Mr. Patterson's own reckless behavior precipitated this incident. Judge Caprio's eyes narrowed. Mr. Whitmore, are you saying Mr. Patterson caused his own injuries? I'm saying that personal responsibility exists on both sides of any accident, Your Honor. My client was simply trying to proceed to an important appointment when Mr. Patterson created a hazardous situation. I see, Caprio said quietly. Mr. Patterson, tell me what happened on June 18th. James Patterson wheeled himself forward, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. Your Honor, I was crossing Waterman Street at the intersection with Hope Street at approximately 10:47 in the morning. It's a marked crosswalk with a pedestrian signal. I've crossed there hundreds of times in the 3 years since I've been in this wheelchair. I served 2 tours in Vietnam, he continued. Lost the use of my legs to shrapnel in 1971. I've been in a wheelchair for 53 years, Your Honor. I know how to navigate traffic safely. That morning, I pressed the pedestrian button and waited for the walk signal. When it turned white, I began crossing. I was about halfway across when I heard the engine. His daughter Rebecca's voice shook as she added, Dad was in the middle of the crosswalk, Your Honor. The walk signal was still showing, and she didn't even slow down. Mrs. Ashford was driving a 2024 Bentley Continental GT, James said. Black, license plate VC 1. She was traveling at least 50 miles per hour in a 35 zone. When she hit me, the impact threw me 15 feet. My wheelchair was destroyed. I had 3 broken ribs, a fractured left arm, a concussion, and internal bleeding. He pulled up his shirt slightly, revealing a massive bruise that still discolored his torso. I spent 11 days in Rhode Island hospital. 4 surgeries. The doctors said if I'd been a younger man, I might not have survived. Apparently, a lifetime of military toughness saved my life. And after the impact? Caprio asked. She didn't stop, Your Honor. She didn't even slow down. She drove away. Left me lying in the street, bleeding, my wheelchair in pieces around me. A college student named Marcus Thompson was the one who called 911. He stayed with me until the ambulance came. But Mrs. Ashford? She just drove away like she'd hit a pothole. Little did anyone know what the investigation would reveal. Victoria Ashford rolled her eyes visibly. Judge Caprio saw it. Mrs. Ashford, he said sharply, is something amusing to you? Victoria set down her salad with theatrical weariness. No, Your Honor. I'm simply exhausted by this entire situation. I've been incredibly generous, offered to pay his medical bills, offered a settlement of $50,000, which is frankly more than fair for an accident that wasn't entirely my fault. But apparently, that's not enough for some people. The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers. James Patterson's face went pale. Let me understand something, Caprio said, his voice dangerously calm. You hit a man in a wheelchair in a marked crosswalk, and you don't believe it was entirely your fault? Your Honor, Whitmore interjected quickly. What my client means is that visibility was compromised by Mr. Patterson's low profile in the wheelchair. Additionally, the intersection in question has known safety issues that the city has failed to address. Our accident reconstruction expert will testify that Mrs. Ashford had insufficient time to stop. The light was green for me, Victoria added dismissively. I had the right of way. And frankly, Your Honor, I was running late for a very important spa appointment, a treatment I'd booked 6 weeks in advance at $2,400 per session. I was proceeding at a normal speed when suddenly there was this wheelchair in my lane, moving extremely slowly. What was I supposed to do? Stop! Rebecca burst out. You were supposed to stop. The crosswalk sign said walk. My father had the right of way. Order, Caprio said, though his expression suggested he agreed with Rebecca's outburst. Mrs. Ashford, continue. Victoria shrugged. Look, I understand he's disabled, and that's unfortunate. But that doesn't give him the right to create dangerous situations on public roads. Wheelchairs move slowly. He was practically crawling across the street. That's a hazard to other drivers. Frankly, I question whether people in his condition should even be out during rush hour. There are off-peak times when traffic is lighter and safer for everyone. The courtroom gasped. James Patterson looked like he'd been slapped. His daughter was openly crying. Did you just suggest, Caprio said slowly, that disabled veterans should only leave their homes during off-peak hours? I'm simply saying that everyone has a responsibility to public safety, Your Honor. If you can't cross a street in a timely manner, perhaps you shouldn't be crossing that particular street. If Judge Caprio's compassion moves you, like it moves millions of others, show your support by subscribing to our channel. We're just starting out, and your subscription means everything. Officer Martinez, Caprio said, his voice tight. Please present the evidence. A police officer stood, holding a tablet. Your Honor, we have surveillance footage from 2 different angles. A traffic camera at the intersection and a security camera from the coffee shop on the corner. I'd like to play them now. The courtroom watched in silence as the footage played. The timestamp read 10:47:23 a.m. James Patterson, clearly visible in his wheelchair, was in the crosswalk. The pedestrian signal showed a white walking figure. He was moving at a steady pace, slow, yes, but consistent and predictable. At 10:47:31, Victoria's black Bentley appeared, approaching the intersection at high speed. The traffic light for her direction was clearly red. She didn't slow down. She didn't brake. She hit James Patterson at full speed, and the impact was horrific even in the silent footage. His wheelchair flew apart. His body tumbled across the pavement, and the Bentley drove away without even tapping its brake lights. The courtroom was absolutely silent, except for muffled sobs from the gallery. "Officer Martinez," Caprio said, his voice shaking slightly. "What was Mrs. Ashford's speed?" 53 miles per hour in a 35 zone, Your Honor. And as you can see, the light was red. She ran a red light and struck Mr. Patterson, who had the legal right of way in a marked crosswalk with an active pedestrian signal. "The footage is doctored," Whitmore said immediately. "We dispute its authenticity." "Both cameras?" Caprio interrupted. "From two separate sources, both showing the same thing? Both doctored?" "Your Honor, we have an accident reconstruction expert, who I'm sure you're paying handsomely," Caprio said coldly. "Continue, Officer Martinez." "We located Mrs. Ashford 2 hours later at the Serenity Day Spa on Benefit Street. When questioned, she initially denied being in an accident. When confronted with her vehicle's damage, significant front-end damage consistent with the collision, she claimed she'd hit a trash can earlier that morning. When we informed her that we had video evidence of her striking a pedestrian, she said, and I quote, "Oh, that. I assumed he was fine. Those people are dramatic about everything." "Those people," Caprio repeated. "Meaning disabled individuals?" "That was our interpretation, Your Honor." "What was Mrs. Ashford's demeanor?" Officer Martinez hesitated. "She was annoyed, Your Honor. Not remorseful. Not concerned about the victim. Annoyed that we were interrupting her spa treatment. She said, 'Do you know how hard it is to get an appointment with Vladimir? I've been waiting 6 weeks. Victoria's face flushed. "That's taken completely out of context." "Is it?" Caprio looked at her. "Did you or did you not go to your spa appointment after hitting Mr. Patterson?" "I didn't realize it was serious," Victoria said defensively. "I felt a small bump. I thought maybe I'd clipped a trash can or something. I had an important appointment." "More important than a human life?" "I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't stop to check." Caprio's voice rose. "You felt an impact significant enough to cause $47,000 in damage to your vehicle, and you just kept driving?" But what the judge discovered next shocked everyone in the courtroom. "There's more, Your Honor," Officer Martinez said. "We examined Mrs. Ashford's phone records pursuant to a warrant. At 10:48 a.m., 1 minute after the collision, she was on a phone call with the spa, confirming her appointment. At 10:49, she texted her assistant, "Got held up in traffic. We'll be there in 10. Don't let them give away my slot." She was on her phone? Rebecca stood up, shaking. "She hit my father and immediately called about her spa appointment?" "Furthermore," Officer Martinez continued, "we found text messages between Mrs. Ashford and her husband from that afternoon. He wrote, 'Police came by asking about an accident.' She responded, 'Nothing serious. Hit some disabled guy in a wheelchair. He's fine, probably looking for a payout. Lawyers say we can settle cheap.'" The courtroom erupted. Multiple people were shouting. James Patterson sat motionless, tears running down his face. "Order!" Caprio banged his gavel repeatedly. When silence finally fell, His face was a mask of barely controlled fury. "Mrs. Ashford," he said quietly, "you referred to hitting a veteran as nothing serious?" Victoria's composure was cracking. "Your Honor, I was texting casually with my husband. It wasn't meant. You called him some disabled guy. You dismissed his injuries. You immediately calculated how to settle cheap. And throughout this entire proceeding, you've shown no remorse, no empathy, no basic human decency." He shuffled through papers. "I also have the accident reconstruction report from the Rhode Island State Police. Not your paid expert, Mrs. Ashford. Their conclusion: you were traveling at 53 miles per hour, you ran a red light, you had clear visibility of Mr. Patterson in the crosswalk for at least 3 seconds before impact, and you made no attempt to brake or swerve. This wasn't an accident. This was reckless endangerment. But most disturbing," Caprio continued, "is your defense. You've blamed Mr. Patterson for being in a wheelchair. You've suggested disabled individuals shouldn't use public streets during peak hours. You've characterized a man who served his country and sacrificed his mobility for our freedom as a hazard and an inconvenience." He looked directly at James. "Mr. Patterson, is there anything you'd like to say?" James wheeled forward, his voice breaking. "Your Honor, I've been in this wheelchair for 53 years. I lost my legs in Vietnam, fighting for this country. I've lived with disability longer than Mrs. Ashford has been alive. And in all that time, I've never let it stop me from living my life. I volunteer at the VA hospital 3 days a week. I mentor younger veterans who are adjusting to disability. I've raised 2 children, one of them sitting right here. And I've been a productive member of society despite my limitations. That morning, I was crossing the street to get to the pharmacy to pick up my heart medication. I was in a legal crosswalk, with a legal signal, moving as quickly as my wheelchair allows. I did everything right. And I nearly died because someone couldn't be bothered to stop at a red light." His voice grew stronger. "But what hurts more than the broken bones and the surgeries and the months of recovery? It's hearing someone say that I shouldn't be out during rush hour, that my wheelchair makes me a hazard, that my disability, a disability I earned serving my country, somehow makes me less entitled to use public streets. I'm not a hazard, Your Honor. I'm a human being. And I have just as much right to cross a street as anyone else, wheelchair or not." The courtroom erupted in applause. Several veterans in the gallery stood, saluting James. Judge Caprio waited for silence, then stood himself. "Mr. Patterson," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "in my 37 years on this bench, I've had the privilege of meeting many heroes. Today, you've reminded me what true character looks like. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your dignity in the face of such breathtaking cruelty." He turned to Victoria, and his expression hardened. "Mrs. Ashford, you are found guilty on all charges. Your actions were not those of someone who made an honest mistake. They were those of someone who values her own convenience over another person's life. Here is my sentence. You are sentenced to 18 months in the Rhode Island Adult Correctional Institution. No house arrest, no ankle monitor. Prison." Victoria gasped. Whitmore stood to object, but Caprio held up his hand. "Furthermore, your driver's license is permanently revoked in the state of Rhode Island. You may reapply after 10 years, but you'll need to prove you understand that sharing the road means respecting all users, including those with disabilities. You are ordered to pay $1.8 million to James Patterson. This covers his medical expenses, his destroyed wheelchair, his ongoing care, and compensation for pain and suffering. This payment is due within 90 days. Additionally, You will complete 500 hours of community service at the Providence VA Hospital, working directly with disabled veterans. You'll clean, you'll assist with physical therapy, you'll hear their stories, and maybe, just maybe, you'll learn what service and sacrifice actually mean. You will attend mandatory defensive driving courses, disability awareness training, and victim impact panels. And you will personally apologize to Mr. Patterson in writing, acknowledging your responsibility and expressing genuine remorse. He leaned forward. Mrs. Ashford, your wealth has insulated you from consequences your entire life. You've been taught that money solves problems, that inconvenient people can be dismissed, that your time is more valuable than anyone else's. Today, you learn differently. You didn't hit a trash can. You didn't hit some disabled guy. You hit James Patterson, a veteran, a father, a volunteer, a man who has given more to his community in one day than you have in your entire privileged life. You ran a red light because you couldn't be bothered to wait. You hit him because you were speeding and distracted. You left him bleeding in the street because your spa appointment was more important. And then you had the audacity to blame him, to suggest that his disability made him responsible for your crime. His voice rose. Money can buy comfort, but it can never buy class. You proved that today. You own a $340,000 car but lack $3 worth of human decency. You could afford a $2,400 spa treatment, but couldn't spare 2 seconds to stop at a red light. 18 months may not seem like much, but in that time, I hope you learn what Mr. Patterson has known his entire life. That every person has value, regardless of their mobility. That convenience doesn't trump safety. That rules exist to protect everyone, especially the vulnerable. The courtroom is the great equalizer, Mrs. Ashford. In here, your billions mean nothing. Your designer clothes mean nothing. Your sense of entitlement means nothing. In here, you're just someone who nearly killed a man and didn't even care enough to stop. The courtroom erupted in applause. James's daughter hugged her father, both crying. Victoria sat frozen, her perfect facade completely shattered. Whitmore gathered his papers in defeated silence. If this story touched your heart, if you believe judges like Frank Caprio represent the best of our justice system, please support our new channel by subscribing and liking this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear that justice and compassion can coexist. Comment below with your city. Let's build a community that believes in fairness for all. Victoria Ashford served her full 18 months. The experience changed her, or at least changed her public image. Whether genuine transformation occurred remains debatable. The $1.8 million was paid within 30 days. James used it to establish a fund helping disabled veterans with mobility equipment that insurance won't cover. James Patterson, now 68, still crosses that intersection regularly. The city installed better signals and added extra crossing time specifically for pedestrians with mobility devices. They call it Patterson's Crossing, unofficially. He got a new wheelchair, top of the line, $15,000, paid for by the settlement. But he says his favorite part of the whole ordeal was the letter. Victoria's court-ordered apology arrived 6 weeks after sentencing. Whether her lawyers wrote it or she did, James doesn't know. But he keeps it in his desk drawer as a reminder that sometimes justice actually works. The case led to Rhode Island passing stricter penalties for hit-and-run accidents involving vulnerable road users, pedestrians, cyclists, and wheelchair users. Leaving the scene now carries mandatory prison time. Judge Caprio, when asked about the harsh sentence, said simply, "Justice cannot have two standards. Mr. Patterson has every right to use public streets safely. His wheelchair doesn't make him a second-class citizen. and anyone who thinks otherwise has no business behind the wheel. James Patterson still volunteers at the VA hospital 3 times a week. He still mentors younger veterans. He still lives his life fully, wheelchair and all. And every time he crosses Patterson's Crossing, he remembers that day. The day a judge looked at a billionaire's wife and a disabled veteran and saw 2 people, equal under law. The day wealth didn't win. The day justice prevailed. Because sometimes the courtroom really is the great equalizer. Sometimes privilege meets accountability. Sometimes a 79-year-old judge with 37 years of wisdom reminds everyone watching that every life has value, every person deserves respect, and no amount of money grants you the right to treat others as disposable. Victoria Ashford learned that lesson the hard way. But she learned it. And James Patterson? He just keeps rolling forward, living proof that dignity isn't about what your body can do. It's about who you are inside. And he's always been, and will always be, a hero.